Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Man Cave. It is Thursday night once again, and we've got Brother Jeff down in Florida as usual, and Tanya's upstairs, and we have our special guest tonight, uh, Mr. Andrew Eising. Did I pronounce that right, Andrew Eising?
Eising, yeah, that's good.
Eising. Okay, from JVR Industries, and we're going to talk with Andrew about vacuum sealing tonight. Uh, but first of all, we're going to do what we always do, which is kick off with a drink. Uh, I decided to get out the E.H. Taylor tonight because I haven't had any of that in a while. And if you're having a drink with us tonight, be sure and leave a comment. Tell me what you're having and where you are. Jeff, are you having the old number seven again tonight?
Nope. I'm having Chattanooga 91.
Oh yeah, Chattanooga. Tanya, have you got some hardcore coffee going up there?
No, I have some
No.
hardcore ginger ale going and the
Ooh.
beautiful Tar Heel
Ginger
Yeti.
ale. Andy, are you having a drink with us tonight?
I am drinking a bottle. I'll probably finish this. We'll see. Pelicano. It's a local
Okay.
winery, Cabernet Sauvignon.
Nice.
And a little plug for our machine. This is actually a bottle that I opened 13 days ago. Vacuum sealed it. Had a glass every 4 or 5 days for the last 13. Still tastes as good as when I opened it. So
That's perfect. That's going to hit on one of the topics I want to talk about tonight, which are interesting uses of vacuum sealers, and that'll be a good one because I hadn't even thought of that.
Yep.
All right, Tanya, we're going to bring you back just a little bit. Okay, guys. All right. So, cheers, everybody. I got a little bit heavy-handed on that pour by accident.
Sure, keep telling yourself that, John.
This is one of the finest examples of bourbon that I've ever had. And you guys know my experience with bourbon's limited, but that Colonel E.H. Taylor from Buffalo Trace is good.
Yep.
Scott, glad you could make it. We've got a good crowd of our regulars here tonight. So, and Andrew, has it started turning cold up in New York yet?
we just got past like a nice 70-degree week, which was, I mean, we had 2 weeks prior to that were pretty miserable, but definitely no snow yet. So as long as we can make it into November without getting snow, it's usually a plus. So.
Okay. We're having a minor glitch in your feed, Andrew. A little bit of are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm here. You got me or no?
Okay, am I here?
Yeah, I can see you and hear you.
Okay, I think the problem might have been on my end there. We just had a glitch, so maybe hopefully that goes away.
All right.
Okay.
Well, I am barricaded in a bedroom far away from our router because I've got 3 kids that never stay in their room. So,
Right.
Yeah, that might be the case, but who knows?
Awesome. Before we get started, I've got a question for you.
Yep.
Are you into barbecue and grilling?
I barbecue. No, not like you guys are. Let's just put it that way. So, yeah, I mean, I certainly love to grill, but not into barbecuing. I'd be one of those guys that if I got a smoker, it would probably be electric, and I'd get picked on by everybody. But
Hey, smoke is smoke.
yeah, my brother-in-law has one of those electric, and he puts out some pretty good products with it. So
Yeah.
I certainly don't knock on it. Him and my uncle always have a little competition going on anytime they do pulled pork, and a lot of times he wins. So.
Well, that was an obligatory question because the audience that you have here tonight is an audience of barbecue and grillers,
Yeah.
and we have found. I hope my audience has found by now that their favorite accessory in their kitchen is their vacuum sealer. We've got a lot of folks here that have vacuum sealers from a wide variety of types, styles, and everything else. But first of all, I would like for you to introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are and about your company.
Yeah. So my name's Andrew Eising. I'm with JVR Industries. Obviously, we've been in business since '72. So we're actually in a month here going to be celebrating our 50th year in business. For 49 of those years, it was privately owned by John Victor Radziwan. That's where the JVR comes from. And we were always in the commercial space. So, well, probably about 48 years of that 50 years. So we started out primarily working with local processors. We were mostly a local company. We were dealing with a lot of the grocery store chains in the area. We worked with all the Wegmans, the Wendy's. We started off with like the Hollymatic Super 54 patty machine, which is a very popular machine for making hamburger patties, and it kind of was like what really took off the patty industry as far as mass production. And we did that for probably about 10, 15 years. And then eventually my dad came on board with the company back in, I'm probably screwing up the year, but I know it was like mid 80s. And then kind of took over a little bit in regards to setting up a dealer network. So we became very distributor oriented. We sold our products through a network of distributors, and we basically repped manufacturers that had no presence in the U.S. So the oldest chamber machine line that we worked with was a company called Lake Effect, or out of Germany. They still produce some parts. They don't make any machinery anymore. So we still work with them. We support machines that are going back 32, 34 years. And then I started working with a company up in Quebec, Sipermac. They had no representation in the U.S. at the time. Obviously, being a Quebec-based company, French Canadians, they didn't have really a way to make it into the U.S. market. So we basically repped them and introduced them to the U.S. and did trade shows and kind of co-exhibited with them. And then started working with a company, ProMarks. And this is all in the commercial space. So it wasn't until about 2 years ago that really wanted to break into the consumer market. Obviously, it's growing. We see a lot of home users getting into that. Obviously, there's always, not always, but for a long time, there's been the food saver market and customers that have been appealed to spending $50, $100, a couple $100.
Right. That was the next question. That was the next question I had was when I was introduced to you, I met you through Darren Wilson, who's another social media barbecue and griller guy that has the
Yep.
Fire and Water cooking channel. About 2.5 years ago or so in the summer, it was in the summer of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I believe you told me at that time, that is when you were trying to break into the home user market. So you've been working in that market space now for what, 2.5 years, 3
Yeah.
years maybe?
Yep.
How's that coming? How's that coming along? Is it successful for you?
I'll be brutally honest. When we got involved with it, this was so about a year ago, my dad and I purchased JVR. So we now are partners, which is really cool. That's a cool relationship that my dad and I have. We've always been real close. So we're 50-50 owners, partners in the business. And this was even before then, that it was more of an experiment, I guess, at the time. We basically found a machine that we really liked. So we're not a smoke and mirrors company. The way the chamber sealer industry works, and this is basically every industry out there. There's companies that manufacture these machines, and everyone basically just picks one up and reps it to a certain extent. A lot of them are copies. The chambers have been around. Chamber vacuum sealers have been around easily since the 50s, if not earlier than that. So this isn't new technology. It's new technology to the consumer market because the price point has come down so much. But basically, these high-end commercial machines are now becoming affordable for the home user. So we, going back probably 15 years ago, we brought in a dozen machines from overseas that were in that lower price point that we were playing around with. This was actually right around when Backmaster started, which everyone knows Backmaster as kind of being the Kleenex of the consumer chamber sealer industry. Well, even before they really became who they were, we brought some machines in, tested them out, ran through the paces. A bunch of them caught fire. we nixed it right away. It was just something that we just didn't really want to pursue at the time. Well, we just kind of kept watching, and in Asia, I mean, they kept improving. So they got to a point where they were able to build a very nice machine at a price point that made sense. And we're partnered with a manufacturer over there that nobody else works with in the U.S. We really like the relationship that we have. Obviously, customers are always asking, because this industry caters to a lot of people that are looking for domestic products, U.S. built products. And we understand that. I mean, whenever someone asks, I'm 100%, yes, it's a Chinese built machine. But we do everything we can as a company to support it as an American company, more so than I think most of the other companies out there. And that's really important to us. We can't build a machine in-house and even come close to being competitive.
Right.
There's one other company that I know of that builds U.S. made chamber machines. Their most economical machines like $3,600, and that obviously doesn't appeal to the consumers. So
Yeah, that's a little steep for the home user. And before I met you and became familiar with JVR, I had four other chamber sealers, and of the ones I've had, I've not come across anything that can touch this one in quality. And I'm super stoked with the performance. You and I have talked multiple times since I've had this machine. I've asked questions here and there, and guys, he always has the answer. He doesn't stumble when you ask him a question. And most recently, I've had a couple of questions about it that he's helped me with. And this thing, I've done something this week that I don't normally do that you guys are going to get to see this weekend. I have put together a 2-year follow-up review on this vacuum sealer that I'm going to publish either tomorrow or Saturday. So this is a good time to have Andrew on with us, because you guys know I do a lot of product review and demo videos, but I've never once come back to a product to give you even more on it. So keep your eyes open for that. Talking about the vacuum sealer market for the home user, I'm aware of a lot of machines that are out there that I think maybe they're starting at the $400 or $500 price point for the really cheap ones. Mm-hmm. And maybe are going up to around $1,500. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I'd say, they're getting down 300, is the lowest I've seen. And then, yeah, they'll go up to 12, 13, 1400. Obviously the 14, 15, that usually tends to get into the 12, 13, 14 inch seal bar, a little bit bigger.
And I want to talk about, in just a little bit, I want to talk about the differences and what creates the price point difference, because there are some very specific features of these machines that make them cheaper or more expensive that I want to get to. But the first thing I want to bring up is, let's talk specifically about the chamber sealer. How does the vacuum sealer work? Can you give us a 60-second walkthrough of what happens when I put my food in the bag in the chamber sealer and press the button to start the cycle?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it to 60. I tend to rattle on. So, but yeah, upon closing the lid, you're ultimately activating the vacuum pump. Some machines have a switch that automatically will activate it, like the JVR Vac 100. Some you'll have to press a button after you close the lid, but ultimately it's turning the pump on. Some might have a valve to open to allow flow to the chamber, and most of them will not. It'll start pulling vacuum on the chamber for whatever set period of time, or usually on the higher end machines, you'll have some sort of vacuum sensor. Low end machines and the more economical ones will not, because you just won't get the accuracy and the speed. They don't react quick enough. So like the Vac 100 has a vacuum sensor on it, but it will not use that sensor for purposes of a vacuum, what you're achieving on the vacuum. And that's done for a reason. Now, once you achieve whatever level of vacuum, you can dial it in. Some you can adjust by the second. Some, it's based on like a percentage. It'll cut off the vacuum flow. And then at that point, your seal bar will raise. Now, one thing that a lot of customers don't understand and home users is how that seal bar is lifting up. That seal bar actually lifts up by the difference in pressure. So Inside the chamber, you've got vacuum. Outside the chamber, it's atmospheric pressure. The difference between inside the chamber under full vacuum, or what we say is full vacuum, on a chamber, it's like 99.8%, versus outside is going to be a difference of about 14.6 pounds per square inch. Atmospheric pressure is 14.7, so you don't get quite to the 14.7. And this is all based on sea level, different elevations. That's going to change. So that 14.7 pounds is now coming into the bladder, the lifting system, and it brings up the seal bar and applies pressure on the upper cushion strip, at which time there's a high resistance heat wire that runs through all these seal bars that will then heat up via electricity, gets, running, it flows through the wire, heats the wire up for a period of time. That's what seals the bag. Cooling cycle then allows that bar to continue to keep pressure on that upper cushion strip for an extra 3 to 4 seconds or whatever you have set there. Right. And then it vents and basically opens a valve and allows air to, re-enter into the chamber. So it's a very simple, when you get down to it, it's a very simple machine, very simple process.
And the difference between the way this system works and something like your typical food saver style is the food saver style vacuum sealer is just sucking the air out of the bag. And this system is sucking the air out of the entire environment around the bag, sealing the bag. And then when the air is released to come back into the chamber, that vacuum still exists inside the sealed bag, and the bag compresses on whatever you've got in it to create that tight vacuum seal. Is that a fair?
That's correct.
Simplification. So, before I got my first chamber sealer, I was using food savers, and I've ruined several food savers by letting moisture get into it. Jeff, you'll appreciate this. When I tried vacuum sealing some double alt Italian flour, and I sucked the pump full of flour and ruined the pump in one of mine doing that. This is one of the things we'll talk about also is one of the main reasons I have a vacuum sealer is so I can buy things in bulk, parcel it down, and keep it fresh, keep it usable for however long I need to keep it usable. I don't hesitate to buy a 25 kilogram bag of Caputo flour for the pizza mill. And when I can package it like that, because I'm not going to have to worry about it degrading. But the other problem that I run into with the food saver style vacuum sealers that I don't have with this guy is the duty cycle. The food saver, if I'm making pulled pork one day and I'm cooking 4 or 5 Boston butts and I'm going to put together 40 plus bags of cooked meat to vacuum seal and go in the freezer, that would take all afternoon with a food saver, because after I've done 5 or 6 bags, it's going to make me stop, let the machine cool down before it'll let me run another cycle. I don't know what the duty cycle is on my VAC 100, or even if there is one, Andrew, because I've never hit it. Is it ever going to slow down?
No, it'll run as fast as you want to run it, as long as you're and there's always caveats to everything, as long as you're using it as a vacuum sealer. So when you have customers that are trying to use it as just a straight sealer, so and that frequently comes up, and actually I encourage you can use it as that, but you just have to give it more time in between. So chamber sealers are designed, well-built ones are designed to run a certain way and at a certain speed.
Okay, that's a good point. That's a good question I have then. If a customer's using that as a sealer, they're when you say that, they're just sealing a bag without a vacuum.
Yeah, and you can't do it, again, going back to how the seal is applied. It's applied based on the difference in pressure. So you're not going to get seal pressure. So a lot of customers will turn the vacuum time down to a second and say, I'm not getting, or 0, because I think it'll even allow you to go to 0. So there is like a little bit of, you need to understand how the machine's working.
Right.
5 seconds, we usually say, is the bare minimum. If you go below 5 seconds, what you're going to see is your seal loses, it's going to become spotty, almost like a railroad track. it's not going to have a nice crisp line all the way across.
I think I read somewhere in your documentation that there's a minimum vacuum time just to get enough negative pressure to raise the sealer bar. That's what we're talking about here.
Correct.
But they make do you? I don't know if you have one or not. I haven't looked, but they make a device just for sealing bags like that.
Yeah, and they're like 20 to 50 bucks. I mean, you can pick them up.
Okay.
Dirt cheap. Yep.
Yeah, that seems like a better solution. But that's an interesting. I would never have considered that on this. But however, on the Food Saver, when I'm cutting bags off a roll, I have to use the Food Saver to seal up one end of that bag before I can put anything in it. So
Yep.
the sealer bar on the Food Saver is technically getting double. It's having to do 2 seals for every bag when I'm cutting bags off a roll to whatever length I need. So that's totally eliminated here in this system. So that brings me to the next question I have, and this question is, why is vacuum sealing a superior method of preservation over something just like a plain Ziploc bag, even if you try to get all the air you can out of a Ziploc before you close it up? What part of the vacuum sealing process, what's happening there that is making it a superior method?
Yeah, so vacuum sealing is removing, obviously, the atmosphere from the bag. And as we know, the atmosphere and the oxygen, more specifically, oxygen is definitely the enemy to spoilage when it comes to meats. Red meats, for example, you've got the oxymyoglobin, the myoglobin, and it ends up oxidizing, and that's what gives you your red bloom. So this is a big thing that on the commercial end that consumers struggle with, because when you vacuum seal in a barrier plastic material, which is what everything's vacuum sealed in, you are now removing the oxygen. Well, now you're removing the bloom from that meat. So you're removing the source to keep that red meat nice and red and fresh, because when you remove the oxygen, it turns like a purplish red color. If you don't vacuum seal it and you allow that bloom, after a couple days, that bloom, the myoglobin fully oxidizes where it can no longer absorb any more oxygen. So it's no longer able to, not only is it no longer able to stay red, but it turns into a brown. And that's when you get the unappealing brown color to the meat. And it's actually spoiling in that process. Whereas when you vacuum seal, you're removing the oxygen. You're also removing all the other contaminants that is in our atmosphere naturally. And you're basically putting a halt to that. The more air you can remove, the more you're going to extend the shelf life. And that's why chamber sealers are so important, because at the end of the day, your Food Saver cannot achieve the level of vacuum that is really necessary to give you a long-term storage out of a vacuum sealed product, especially in the freezer. You're going to see, if you vacuum seal anything with your Food Saver and throw it in the freezer, a few months later, you're still going to have ice crystals, and you're going to still have some freezer burn to that, because you need to remove. Yes, a chamber doesn't remove 100%, but 99.8%. And there's actually studies that show 99.5 is really the key. You want to remove 99.5% of the air in order to basically put a complete halt to spoilage when it comes to most of your red meats and a variety of other products. But obviously the studies are all based off of meats, because that's where the industry has been for so many years. So if you start searching vacuum sealing, it's always going to be referencing either poultry or red meats or pork. You'll have a hard time finding information out on a lot of fruits and vegetables, and items that are not being vacuum sealed in the mainstream, when you go to the grocery store.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that they don't benefit from it. It just means that they have not, there's no real data out there other than consumer data that people do their own testing. So
Tanya, hang on to David's question. I want to come back to that, because that's something I definitely want to talk about, but not just yet. David, we'll answer that question, or we'll talk about it. We'll talk to Andrew about that. So the oxygen is a key player in food degradation. Which part of the process is eliminating the freezer burn?
well,
Is
you're
it just the fact that the bag is so tight against the product?
Well, you're removing the oxygen, and therefore you're removing the excess. The oxygen is actually what allows the ice crystals to form. When you don't have air and all you have is whatever remaining moisture is in the bag, it's never going to actually crystallize.
Okay.
To get into the science of that, someone will probably leave a comment and say that I'm not explaining it correctly, so I'm not even going to begin.
Okay, that's fine. I was just curious because when I first started vacuum sealing, even with the channel sealers, the first thing I was trying to solve was freezer burn and extend life. I didn't even at the time I didn't even know that oxygen was a real player in the game. So that's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
So that circles us back around to how is a chamber sealer different? Well, we've already talked about this and how the chamber sealer works, but the chamber sealer is basically different from the channel sealer because the entire chamber is being depressurized instead of just the inside of the bag.
Yeah. So what it's able to do is it's able to pull a greater vacuum, no matter how good of an embossed channel sealer that you have. One of the leak points, and it's microscopic, it's not big, but one of the leak points is the gasket being pinched off around the bag. You're never able to create a perfect seal around that chamber. So you do have small leaks there.
Right.
By the nature, obviously, they're more economical, so they are unable to, and based on their size, you're only able to fit a select quality of vacuum pump in there. And that's why you can't run them hard, because they don't have large enough seal transformers that can take the power of the seal wire and run that cycle after cycle without overheating. If you open up a VAC 100, you're going to see there's a hefty, that black steel box in there with all the coil wires. If you took it apart, that's a transformer. So that does heat up to a certain extent every cycle. And eventually, if you ran it with really short cycles hard enough, it would overheat. But it's plenty big enough under normal operation to run it continuously cycle after cycle.
Right.
And you just don't get that. There's obviously things being skimped on in order to bring the price point down on those machines. So, but also the fact that you're putting inside the chamber, you're keeping an equal atmosphere inside the bag, outside the bag. It's 100% equal. And that's why a lot of people are confused by it. Looks like nothing's happening during the entire vacuum cycle. That's because it's equal. There is no pressure being exerted on the bag or on the product at that point. It's not until it re-equalizes and the outside atmosphere comes in that it has that effect.
Visually, it all happens at once. It starts to happen when that sealer bar comes up. So yeah, it is intriguing to watch because you don't see, like Andrew just said, you don't see much of anything until the pressure's let back into the chamber, and then that bag it collapses down around everything.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that people that I have turned on to chamber sealers love about the chamber sealer is the fact that since you are not sucking air and everything that's inside the bag towards the edge of the bag, you can seal liquids with chamber sealers. One of the things I've done is when I make stocks and I want to save my stocks in 1 cup or 2 cup increments, I dump them I now vacuum seal that. I put it in a vacuum seal bag because I can I can lay those bags flat in a tray and let them freeze flat. And it works really well. And you don't have to worry about sucking that liquid up into the channel or into the pump during the process. There's a specific method for laying that bag in there and laying the top up across the sealer bar where the bags, the contents of the bag are a little bit lower than that sealer bar. Nothing's going to come out of that bag during that process. And by the same token, I would not suck my 00 grind flour out of the bag into a pump either to seize the pump up. So I have a specific question about sealing liquids. If you were sealing stocks or soups or things that are highly liquid like chili, which is not entirely liquid, or anything you might want to vacuum seal that's extremely wet, how important is how much vacuum you get in that process? Because one of the things I see happening, and this comes from an old high school chemistry experiment, when you reduce the pressure inside that chamber sealer, the liquids tend to boil at room temperature, and you can sit there and watch that happen. Is there a minimum amount of vacuum you need if you're going to seal something that's mostly liquid? Are you gaining anything by a really strong vacuum, or can you get by with less vacuum on liquids?
Yeah, so you still want to remove the excess moisture. So if you get past, or the excess atmosphere that's in the bag, if you get past that where all the air is already removed and you're actually lowering the pressure beyond, and that's a sliding scale. So that's all based off temperature. So if you actually looked
Right.
at a graph, and it's almost like a straight line, as your temperature decreases, the amount of vacuum that you can pull in order to achieve the boiling point is also going to, well, in that case, it's going to increase. So you can pull more vacuum on a colder liquid. That's why you always want to pre-chill as much as possible. Definitely refrigerate anything that's got a high moisture content prior to vacuum sealing, because that'll allow
Right.
you to remove more air before it hits that boiling point. A good gauge to an ideal amount is watching that liquid, and that's why you want a machine, ideally, and this is something that, John, if you get the new machine, you'll definitely appreciate, is the skip function. So what it allows you to do is observe the liquid, observe your stock, and when it starts to simmer, let it go past the simmer point as soon as it hits the rapid boil. Just like if you're boiling a pot of water on your stove, once it hits the rapid boil, hit the skip. So hit the down arrow
Right.
in the case of our machine.
And
You're
that
going to get
just stops the vacuum cycle.
It'll just stop it and skip over into the seal cycle. Yeah, and that'll give you the optimal amount of vacuum in that package. Once you hit the rapid boiling phase, if you let it sit there, you're not going to, there's not going to be any advantage by letting it sit there under rapid boil for 5-10 seconds. You're not actually pulling any more air out of the product or out of the bag. You're at that point, you're just boiling the liquid, evaporating, and the moisture is turning into a vapor. The vapor is working its way into the pump. And that's where that's the only situation where you can really do some damage to a vacuum pump over time, is doing liquids and constantly getting it to that rapid boil and holding it there for an extended period of time. That's where you're going to see some moisture draw into the oil, which will eventually pollute it and, potentially cause issues if you don't maintain the pump.
Right.
But
That's something I actually showed in this new video. I showed the oil pump. I opened up the machine and looked inside and showed where the maintenance takes place there. And that's a question I have, because I don't really know I don't know how to gauge how frequently I need to change that oil. I have changed the oil in this VAC 100 3 times since I've had it, which I don't know if that's enough or too much, but the oil, when I take the oil out, it's noticeably cloudier than it was when I put it in there, but it's not opaque by any means. How do you gauge when that oil change needs to take place on the oil pump on a machine like this?
Yeah, so as a general rule of thumb, that's what a lot of people are looking for. It's like we say every 6 months. So you got to put something in the manual. You can't explain it and go into depth. And
Right.
A lot of customers just need something that's very straightforward. But for example, the machine I have in our garage that we use on a regular basis, I don't even go off the 6-month rule. It's really about observing the oil and gauging when it gets to the point where it's becoming polluted. So whenever you're checking the oil, you want to cycle the machine, but then let it sit after it's done cycling a few minutes.
Right.
If you check the oil immediately after it's done cycling, you're always going to see that it's going to have a lot of air bubbles in it.
Mhm.
That's because all oils in vacuum pumps are going to be non-detergent, so they don't have the anti-foaming agents in them to prevent them from foaming. So it's going to look foamy. You want to let it sit for a few minutes until the air bubbles go away, and then observe the color of the oil. That's before the moisture separates, because if it sits long enough, it's obviously going to separate, and it'll look milky.
Right.
Having it slightly milky is really, it's a judgment call ultimately. But that's why on the newest version, what we also did is we added a conditioning program to the programming. So you can go to program P9 and then you can run a 5-minute cycle. And what happens during that is it runs continuously. You close the lid and it'll run basically a 5-minute long vacuum cycle. And what that does is it gets the pump up to full operating temperature. And depending on how polluted the pump is, and you can basically run it one time, observe and look at your oil, run it again if necessary. What happens is the pumps actually will do a good job naturally expelling moisture because they will hit over 212 degrees. So the oil will exceed that temperature. While the oil is not going to burn off at 212, it's got a much higher boiling or a much higher flash point. But the liquid will boil off and it'll just get pushed and forced out the exhaust of the vacuum pump. So by running that conditioning program, you can get, a much longer lifespan on your oil before you have to change it again.
That sounds like a nice update. So to maximize the life of the oil under normal conditions, you want to minimize vacuum sealing things that are not room temperature or cooler, correct?
Yeah, or at the very least, you just have to, again, observe when it hits that boiling point. But what you might notice is if you do something warm, it's going to hit the boiling point within seconds. You'll probably be 5-6 seconds in on a hot item, and then you're not going to get the results that you want because there's going to be a lot of air left in that package.
And I'll tell you from experience, you can see when that's happening because it'll develop a fog on the inside of the glass.
Mm-hmm.
I've had it happen. I learned through trial and error that I needed to cool my stuff before I put it in there. When I package up the pulled pork, I put it in my vacuum seal bag. I fold the bag over, use a clothespin to hold it together. I throw it in a pan and throw it in the refrigerator. And typically I'll come back and vacuum seal it the next day and everything's good to go because that meat's cold and it seals very well at that point. So that's good to know. I figured that from what I was seeing, that vacuum sealing things that weren't cool was probably not a good idea. I don't know how. I would assume that probably would affect. I don't know how that would affect something like a food saver, other than the fact that it's sucking moisture. How would that negatively impact that kind of device, the channel sealer?
Well, a lot of the channel sealers aren't going to even hit the boiling point, but it'll still boil if it's hot enough. I mean, a food saver will get that to boil.
Every one I've ever seen is sucking water into the channel before it gets to that.
Yeah, well, it's probably boiling over and it's causing it to siphon. Because even on your VAC 100, if you have the liquid too high and you hit the boiling point, it'll boil to the point where it'll boil out of the bag. We've had plenty of customers, especially on the commercial end, when they have a new operator come in that starts vacuum sealing something with a lot of moisture in it, they'll make an absolute mess of their machine because they're getting to that boiling point and it's sitting there rapid boiling, bubbling, and overflowing out of the bag. So it is always important to keep an eye on that. But your food saver, your biggest threat is going to be the siphoning effect, because anytime you do anything with liquid, as soon as it starts pulling vacuum, since that bag is external, you have 14.7 pounds per square inch of pressure pushing on that bag as air is being removed. So it's constantly, it's trying to force whatever's in that bag out. It's the opposite of what you would want to do. I mean, it's adequate for giving you a slight benefit in as far as shelf life goes, but ultimately, I mean, that's why chamber sealers are becoming so popular, because customers are seeing the advantage to them.
Well, I haven't hit what I could call shelf life yet. The stuff that the cooked meats that I vacuum seal and throw in my freezer ultimately get consumed well before I've come close to even getting to a shelf life situation where the stuff's no longer any good. I have kept things in my freezer between 8 and 12 months that have been vacuum sealed with the VAC 100, and I can't tell that I've lost anything. Does that sound about normal?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I should take some pictures. We have like in our break room at the office, we've got our fridge freezer, and we're constantly doing, experiments here and there. And I know there's ground beef in there that's, gosh, I think from when we moved into the new building, and that's going on 10 years now, that you would take out, and, I would have absolutely no qualms about eating it. So one of the great things about freezing product is whether a product is frozen, vacuum sealed or not, it's edible
Right.
indefinitely. It won't hurt you. It won't make you sick. There's no bacteria. So that's one of the benefits about freezing. That there is no technical shelf life when you freeze. But the quality of the product is going to greatly degrade when you don't vacuum seal or have a way of, because it's going to taste rancid, but it won't actually make you sick. That's
Right.
Ultimately, I sat through a little seminar at Penn State one time at a trade show that, definitely stressed that. That was referenced in regards to shelf life studies. There is no shelf life when it comes to freezing, but definitely vacuum sealing cuts that and makes it basically indefinite. As long as you hold a seal and you're pulling down to a 99.8% vacuum, it'll sit there. I mean, 10 years later, and you can take that out, and you'd be hard pressed to tell the difference between it and meat that was sitting in your freezer for a couple months.
Right. Okay. So you being in this business, tell us what you use. What are the most common things you're doing with your vacuum sealer at home?
Definitely the most traditional. I mean, we buy quarter cows from our local processors, and obviously we work with a lot of like the custom guys locally here. So I usually try to spread that around and work with a different guy. So our freezer is always full with ground. Usually when we get it from them, a lot of them are already using vacuum sealers, so they'll have it. But we'll break it down sometimes to smaller portions and vacuum seal it. So that's by far our most used. That's what we use it for the most. But definitely, especially now with our kids, we do leftovers all the time. So we'll do, if we have a whole pan of lasagna, whatever's left over, we'll portion it out and throw it into bags. Enough that's something that's enough for like 2 or 4 of us. Hot dogs, we're constantly doing, buy a 5-pound bag of it, and then we'll split it up into 4 into each bag, throw 4 of, just enough that we can have one meal. So that's big. I've started using the wine a lot more. That's definitely a big thing for us. Leftovers, fruits and vegetables benefit if you use the canisters. So we've done that with fruits, especially. Obviously, if you take like a strawberry and you throw it in a bag, you're going to crush it, and you're not going to, it still tastes fine, but you're just not going to have the appealing strawberry when you take it out days later.
That brings up another thing I wanted to mention, and I want to apologize to you for this in advance. I bought your external canister as soon as it became available, and I have not done any video content on that. I remember when you told me that was coming out, and as soon as I saw it, I ordered one, and I got that thing out, and I haven't done video content on that yet. But guys, and you'll see this. I'm going to try to get this done. I'm in the middle of a job change, so I'm a little bit busy at the moment. But in the next week or two, I'm going to do video content on that. This canister, it's a 3-gallon stainless steel tub that's got a lid that goes on it with a ball valve that you hook up to the vacuum pump on the VAC 100, and you can put mason jars in there and seal jars. And I was actually playing with this on the VAC 100 yesterday as I was shooting some of this new video content. I put a couple of half pint mason jars in there and ran a 45-second cycle on that, and I could not pry those lids off with my fingers. I had to get the can opener to pry them off. It does a great job of sealing jars. So as Andy's saying here, if you've got things you want to vacuum seal that you don't want that might crush in a bag, you can also do it with jars. And what I also want to do is I want to do the marinate thing. I want to do the marination under vacuum seal. Uh, a structure. Scott's asking, could you put a structure in a bag and seal in that? I'm not sure I understand the question. Jeff, do you understand what he's saying there? I don't either. Scott, clarify that for me. Put a structure in a bag and seal in that. I'm not sure I understand the question. So
unless he's referring to like a tray. I mean, we do have customers ask that if they can put their product into a tray and then slide the tray into the bag, something along those lines, which.
Well, I'm assuming you probably could do that as long as it'll fit in
I
the
mean, under
bag,
full
right?
vacuum, what it does is it distorts. It's going to obviously,
Right.
any air void that's in that, it's going to distort it. It's going to curl it. It'll work.
It
but
couldn't be like a foam tray. It would have to be something fairly rigid.
Yeah.
Okay. Hang on. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
I've lost my audio here. Hang on. Dadgummit.
Technology.
I've got a minor problem. Okay. Technical difficulties at the man cave. Okay. One moment. I will be right back.
Sounds good. So, Jeff, what are you running over there? You got a food saver?
I've got a Magic Vac from Italy.
Okay. Yeah, I've thought about buying one just to play with it and see what
It's
all
pretty
about.
good. I want to get a chamber sealer though. It's the bad thing about any of those type food saver, Magic Vac, whatnot. Got anything with moisture in it? It's pulling it out. You don't get the good seal.
Yeah.
You're better off freezing it before you try to vacuum seal it.
Yep, I hear you.
I think I'm back, but I may end up with some echo. Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Sound good to me.
Okay, we'll see how this
Can you hear me
pans
now?
out. My headphones, I lost my battery in my earbuds. Oh boy. Well, anyway, we're coming close to being done here. I want to come back to that question that David Garcia asked earlier.
Yeah, he's got two questions up there, John.
Let me scroll back up here. Yeah, oops, there it is. David's asking about vacuum sealing a meat with a liquid. And what he's referring to is when we get stuff like at a Costco or Sam's Club that's in a cryovac, there's a good bit of liquid in there. And if we break that down and repackage it, when I break mine down and repackage it, I typically dry it as much as I can. Is that a good procedure?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you'll always have a little bit of purge when you vacuum seal, especially at the grocer level. But when you go to reseal it, removing that, you're not going to dry out the beef. You're not going to do any negative effects to it. But again, it's going to also help you to pull a even greater vacuum, because any moisture does affect your vacuum level a little bit. It's hard. You would have to hook up a calibrated gauge to it to see. But if you put a cup of water inside a vacuum chamber and you pull a vacuum, the actual vacuum level achieved is going to be much less than it would be on a dry chamber without anything in there.
Right.
So yes, the drier the product in the sense of like, a cut of meat or something like that. Yeah, you want to at least take the excess moisture out of there.
And David's also asking about the red-brown color that he gets after he freezes a vacuum sealed meat. And all I can think of there is the oxygen. There's not enough oxygen that's been removed to keep that oxidation from occurring.
Yeah. It's commonly, it's usually a purplish red is what you'll see, or it might be even a purplish brown. It all depends on, obviously interpretation. But yes, you definitely lose that red. You definitely lose the red bloom. It's kind of similar to like if you take hamburger patties and you have a stack of them. A lot of times if you take them apart, especially when they're fresh, you'll notice that the patty in between will turn a brownish, especially a brownish purplish color when you separate them. And that's just because those have been touching one another and they haven't had any exposure to oxygen. Similar thing's going to happen when you actually go to vacuum seal. So that's perfectly normal. It doesn't become as appealing. And that's where vacuum sealing was really hard to push on the retail level for the longest time. A lot of customers were, and a lot of accounts were actually trying to educate customers as much as possible. And some of the big packaging companies out there, like, I don't know if you guys have heard of like Cryovac and Kerwood, these are like really big multi-billion-dollar companies that are developing new products. They're coming out with products with the intent to keep the bloom on meat without negatively affecting shelf life. And they're doing things like embedding plastics with nitrites and nitrates that keep the bloom, but then they have to lobby with Congress to allow them to use that without disclosing it to the customer. And that's a whole another story. But that's all done just for
being a problem.
Yeah,
similar to the Walmart situation when they were getting
that's all cosmetics though. At the end of the day, it's a cosmetic thing. So customers just have to realize that that's not a bad thing. Yes, it doesn't look as appealing or pretty, but at the end of the day, when you cook it up, it's going to be delicious. So
I'm glad you said that, because that's a reasonable point. It's a perceived problem that's not a real problem.
Correct. Yeah.
It doesn't look like it did when you put it in the bag, but the end result's going to be just as good.
Yep.
Okay. Well,
David's second part of his question was, what vacuum sealer would you recommend?
Well, without a doubt, the VAC 100.
Yeah.
Andy, tell us about the VAC 110. That you've got a new model, a VAC 110 as well. What are the differences between the VAC 100 and the 110? If I'm not mistaken, those are your two consumer-oriented chamber sealers, correct?
Correct. Yeah, the 110. I mean, the 100 is really our flagship model. It's the one that we really are pushing to the consumer market. We're coming out with different accessories, and we're trying to make it sit nice on a countertop, display well, be relatively compact while not sacrificing, some of the features that we really want to have on a machine. The 110 really is because I'll be honest, the VP 215 is a perceived like the go-to machine in the industry. And right. I don't know its history, but it's very similar. So our 110 definitely has some things that outperform the 215. For one, it's got an 11-inch seal bar. We make custom 11-inch wide bags that you can only get from a few sources. So we optimize it and use the chamber as well as we can, so you can fit some larger bags in there. But the big differences between the 100 and the 110 are definitely going to be the 110 is looked at as the powerhouse, and that's kind of how we're marketing it. And the 100 is the convenience packed machine. So if you're looking to vacuum seal and only do traditional vacuum sealing, which is still the majority of customers, the 110 is going to do it quicker. And you're going to be able to run it much faster because it's got a bigger pump. It's got the seal bar's got a little bit wider seal wire. Okay. It's just a more robust machine, but they both have the same quality of components. It's just one is basically bigger, heavier, built for speed. The other one's built for convenience and features. Okay.
Jordan, I want to answer that question as well. So Tanya, just leave that question up there. I want to talk about that too, but let's see. I just lost my train of thought because there was something I wanted to talk about before that. But the cost, one of the things that I think a lot of my audience find prohibitive about the chamber sealer is the price point. And I want to briefly, this is something else that's coming in that video that I'm getting ready to publish. I talked about the bullet points of why the oil pump vacuum is better than the air piston system. It does remove more oxygen. It's quieter, and we'll talk about that. But it's a more expensive unit, but it's a serviceable unit as well. You can if you run into problems down the road, you can replace these things rather than have to ditch it and buy a new machine. I firmly believe that in my experience with vacuum sealers, with chamber sealers, that I have saved money in the long run by buying chamber sealer, because the money that I'm saving money at multiple levels. The first level is on the bags. The bags that I use are the small bags I use are about 3 cents a piece. The medium sized bags are about a nickel a piece, and the large size bags are 8 or 9 cents a piece. And when I calculated the cost of the bags that I'm cutting off a roll for the food saver, I'm north of 20 cents a piece on about every bag. And I also talked about the volume I do on that in that video that's getting ready to come out. I have sealed north of 2,500 bags, maybe even close to 3,000 bags in the 2 years that I've been using this machine. And if you figure an average of 15 cents savings per bag at 3,000 bags, that adds up. That comes together quickly as a lot of money. And I'm not throwing away food that's I'm saying the bigger savings is coming in the fact that there's zero waste of the food that we buy, because it doesn't go bad if I take care of it with the vacuum sealer. So the chamber sealer does cost more, but it's going to come back to you. It's going to come back to you more quickly than you might realize. And one of the final notes in the video that's coming is, I didn't realize how many things I could vacuum seal until I started doing it with the chamber sealer. I've started looking for things. Can I vacuum seal that and keep it? And it's great. You can start buying things in bulk and saving money. So Jordan's asking here, can you reheat frozen meat in the vac bag with a water bath? Jordan, that is one of the most common things I do here. I put the pulled pork, I put the ribs, I put the brisket, the stuff that I can't eat right away, which is most of it, in vacuum seal bags and toss it in the freezer. And my stovetop behind me over here in the other end of the man cave kitchen, my sous vide tank is sitting there with the sous vide circulator on it, because I use it 3 or 4 times a week, maybe 5 times a week at a minimum at lunchtime, reheating stuff that comes out of my freezer. I drop the bag right in there, right straight from the freezer, straight into the sous vide bath, and reheat it. When I'm doing something like barbecue stuff, I do it at 165 degrees, and it can go from freezer to ready to eat in 30 minutes at 165 degree sous vide bath. Andrew, do you do that? Do you have a sous vide circulator?
Yeah. I purchased one a few years ago to give as a gift, and then I started reading into it, and I ended up keeping it and finding something else to gift to whoever I bought it for. But yeah, no, it's a game changer. I mean, I the first time I really got to use it was it was a Father's Day, and I wanted to cook steaks for all the dads. And there was like 30 some people that were attending, and yeah, just to be able to throw, whatever it was, 20 or 30 strip steaks. I rigged up a cooler, threw them all in there, had them all, perfectly cooked at, 132, I think I did, just to get, something in the medium so that everyone was okay with it. Finished them off on the grill, and yeah, to be able to do that and have the perfect cook. And then you start finding out, we deal with a lot of restaurants on the commercial level. And a lot of people don't realize how many of these high-end steakhouses are using sous vide. So they're wondering, how do they cook these steaks so perfect? Well, it's because they're cheating away. It's sort of a cheater's way. I mean, it's easy. You throw it in hot water, it keeps it at a constant temperature, and then it's really just the sear at the end that you really need to worry about.
Right. So yes, Jordan, that's one of the most common things I do here. I reheat in those bags, directly in the bags. I'm not sure I know that Jordan's asking, do you miss not having the resealable Ziploc bag feature that most vac sealers have versus a chamber sealer? I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the new bags, John, some of them have a little flap. It's like a Ziploc bag, but then it's got a flap, and you put the external mechanism on it to suck out the air. It works good, but a lot of times they'll leak after
okay.
a longer
Well,
Yeah.
period of time. So it's
so
not something I miss.
I mean that not to overly plug our company, but we do have zipper chamber vacuum pouches, which is pretty unique to us because we sell them on a commercial level. Um, they're not commonly sold by a lot of our competitors because I don't think they would be able to buy the volume to actually sell to consumers. But we have some really large accounts that buy reclosable zipper vacuum
Okay.
pouches. So we do have those. We have them in stock.
All right. Well, I understand the question now. So my answer to that would be no, I wouldn't miss that because at 3 to 5 cents a bag, it's not a player for me. Jeff, are you
Not,
using bags like that?
I typically I'm not, but I have when I bought the multi-pack of food saver bags, you get like 5 or 10 of those things in the box. So
Yeah.
I have used them, but like I say, they over time they leak.
Yeah.
Okay.
If anyone
Well,
needs them, I mean, we sell them in packs of 100, so they'd work in any chamber sealer.
yeah,
And they're
I've
like
not used
15
those, so
bucks.
I don't have any experience with it. But there have been cases where I think cheese was mentioned here. And one of the things I do, I vacuum seal a lot of cheese because if I open up a 1 pound block of cheese or a 2 pound block of cheese and only use a little bit of it, I'll throw that block in a bag. Now, I from experience, I know that I want to go ahead and put that in my 10 by 13 bag because I'm going to cut that bag open again. I'm going to cut some more cheese off of that bag and I'm going to drop that leftover block right back in that same bag and throw it right back in the chamber sealer and seal that bag up again. I've done
Yep.
When I do that with blocks of cheese, I might use that 10 by 13 bag. I might seal that bag 4 times before I throw it away. That bag might get 4 cycles. So, uh, but that's from experience. When you've been using a chamber sealer long enough, you start to think about things like that. So yes, I've had bags that have had 4 lives at least.
But that also makes it more cost effective too.
Yeah, and uh, I don't. Andrew, is there any reason I shouldn't do that?
No, no,
No,
that's a great use of. We have unlimited bags, so I guess I'm not that smart with my usage of bags, but that's
well,
that's
yeah,
very smart.
but it's something like I said. Just if I've got a 2 pound block of sharp cheddar, I'm not gonna. There's rare cases where I'm ever gonna use that all at once. So
Yeah.
I'll put it in a bag, knowing that I'm probably gonna want to reseal it again. So I take my scissors and just trim off right below the seal where I'm not losing that much, and I put whatever I've got back in there. I have used bags. I have sealed bags as many as 4 or 5 times, and so yeah, I'm not losing anything there. Guys, before we wrap up, do you have any questions for Andrew that Andrew might be able to answer about chamber sealers and why you should have a chamber sealer that we haven't talked about? I know we've been pretty comprehensive here tonight on I think why a chamber sealer is a great solution. Um, let's see, give a couple minutes here. We've been our hour, and I don't want to hold you guys up too long, but there's a lot. I love this thing, and it's a beast. And I'll say it again, and I know you guys have all heard me say this many times before. That VAC 100, well, short of an instant read thermometer, the VAC 100 is the most commonly used accessory in my kitchen. I use it nearly every day. Nearly every day, something's either getting sealed or multiple things are getting sealed. my wife, let's bring Tanya back up in here before it gets too late. Tanya reminded me yesterday that she's got some bacon that needs to be sealed. Tanya likes to buy 3 or 4 pound packs of bacon, and I take those and put 4 slices in a 6x8 bag, fold it over in half, and individually package each one of those where she can pull them out as needed. Andy Bryan's got a question. Is the skip feature available on the 110? Does it do that?
Unfortunately not. No. And that's where the separation is, and we're trying to keep it separate. The 110, 310, 410, the larger models are all the same. They're very simplistic programs. You can't program a variety of different programs into them. The skip feature is something, because of the programmability of the 100, that we were able to incorporate in. So without changing out the controls completely, the rest of the models at this time do not have the skip function, but it is something that we would like to explore more in the future.
And Janice, I think I noticed today when I was on JVR's website that there is a current promotion going on the VAC 110 or the VAC 100. Andy, is the VAC 100 on sale at the moment?
The VAC 100, there are some promotions out there from some of our affiliates. We also have one, if you call our office, we are running a $50 off on the VAC 100. Also, stay tuned around the Black Friday time is usually when we run sales on all the models. It's really the only time of the year that we run sales on the 100, 110, 310. I think we're going to do something on the entire thing, on the entire model line. So definitely stay tuned around Black Friday if you're able to hold out.
I thought I saw, maybe I'm, okay, maybe not.
Every once in a while, we'll do certain things. Like we did a blemished cover kind of promo where we offer covers now on all the machines, so you could get a free cover. There's always little things here and there, but by far the best deal on one.
Janice, I'll keep you up to date on that. When I see it, I'll let you know. I know Janice is one of the few people that is here with us every week that cooks more than I do. So I know Janice would benefit from a chamber sealer. She would quickly fall in love with that, and she'd turn into another me of looking for what can I put in that thing. And Janice, I'll keep you up to date. I'll watch for that for you. So what else? Have we got any more questions? The VAC 100 currently, like there it is, the VAC 100 list for its current, it's $8.99, and I think the VAC 110 is, yeah, there it is. It's the VAC 110's $9.99. Guys, it's worth it. You will not be disappointed with that. Everybody that I know that's bought the VAC 110 on my recommendation, they've all come back to me and said, I can't believe I waited this long to buy one of those. So
I love the thing. You know, we buy lots of cheese, and
yeah,
you know, we can slice up and have different cheeses, and then I could take it down to John and he'll vacuum seal that baby right on up for us. And like I said,
a couple of weeks ago, we had a cold spell come through here, and I told Tanya, I said, this is going to be a perfect opportunity to cold smoke cheese. And I bought, what did I buy? Did I buy 4 pounds or 8 pounds? I bought 8 pounds of cheese.
I think it was 8 pounds.
And I cut it into smaller pieces. I cold smoked it and vacuum sealed individual pieces of it. And I can tell you from experience, the cold smoked cheese, I have kept it in the refrigerator for a year, and it's good. I've never had any problems with cold smoked cheese vacuum sealed for a year in my refrigerator. Yep. Most of the time it doesn't last that long, but I specifically held back on a couple of them to see how long I could keep it. And I did keep cheese for a year that I have got no trouble eating that. So I really don't know where the cutoff point is on cheese. So
yeah,
there's a reason, Andrew, you need a smoker. You need a setup to cold smoke cheese.
I know.
You're in a perfect environment to do it up there in the wintertime.
Yeah.
And I know
I can't
you guys,
wait until I have more time on my hands that I can do smoke. We did
I know
a
you can
pig roast
I
a
told my
couple.
wife at dinner tonight. You've got to make time for yourself. She's
I
not doing
definitely
enough
do.
of
I
that.
definitely need to do that. I'll admit that. So
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Well,
we're
I
gonna
will
wrap
tell
up,
you-
guys. We're at an hour and 10 minutes here. I don't want to keep going too long over. Andrew,
One
I
more thing,
appreciate you
John.
coming on with us. It's
John, your wife wants to speak.
oh,
one more thing.
okay.
Okay, for those of you who are still questioning, do I really need this? Now, I'm going to tell you something. It's going to make me sound incredibly spoiled, and I am. But one of the absolute 500 stars best uses of the vacuum sealer is when my husband measures out individual packets of the stoned ground grits that I like and vacuum seals them and brings them up to me, and I can just take them out and enjoy them anytime I want. I don't have to measure. It's just there, snip, snip, snip.
oh,
Perfect.
you are spoiled.
I am spoiled.
John
Now,
takes
listen.
good care of her.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm having a bit of a feed problem, but I think Tanya was talking about grits.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
She was singing your accolades.
the Marsh Hen Mill grits that we buy out of Edisto Island, South Carolina, are a real treat. And I keep those vacuum sealed so they stay in top-notch condition. And I haven't done it lately for Tanya, but I used to package that up in individual sizes. And Beth, unfortunately, bread is not an easy thing to get away with in a chamber sealer because it'll crush it. However, dough, I have vacuum sealed pizza dough and thrown it in the freezer. There's a little trick I use for that. I get my pizza dough that I don't want to cook until later. I do what I call a par freeze. I set it on a tray in the freezer and let it firm up for an hour, and then I put it in a vacuum seal bag. I do it in a chamber sealer, throw it in the freezer where the dough doesn't mash flat when I vacuum seal it, and I can pull that dough back out. I'll let it come up to room temp and cook it, and I've had great success with that, but not bread.
Yeah.
Not bread.
No,
Maybe
that's where
Andrew can give us some insight on that. Is there any
Yeah.
way you can do bread without ruining it in a chamber sealer?
So your best bet from a consumer standpoint on a consumer machine would be just sealing it on a very low level of vacuum and using a desiccant, like an oxygen absorber. That's going to give you your best result there. On a little bit higher end machine, what they use is a gas flush machine. So because a chamber sealer during the vacuum, it's not actually crushing anything during that cycle. So it's still able to, by using a gas machine, you remove all the air and then you inject a pure gas, like you would inject a pure nitrogen or CO2 mixture. So you equalize it, but now it's equalized in a very pure, clean state where it doesn't crush the bread, but gives you the shelf life that you're looking for. Unfortunately, it's usually cost prohibitive to most consumers,
Yeah,
which
that's
I fully
not
understand.
a home application,
Yeah,
right?
no.
Yeah,
That sounded
I
a
can-
little pricey.
Yeah,
I
it can
can
get a little
see that.
pricey. Yep,
Nitrogen will not permit bacterial growth.
correct.
So yeah, that makes sense. I had never thought of that before. So yeah, nitrogen wouldn't be the only gas that could be used in that process either. But the great thing about nitrogen is it's an inert gas. It's not going to negatively impact anything. So all right, are we good?
Isn't my husband cute? Don't y'all love him when he gets all geeky?
That's adorable. How long you guys have been married?
What?
Not long enough.
Then newlyweds.
So you're still newlyweds. You're still in the honeymoon phase.
I think 4 years. Is that correct?
Honeymoon phase.
Yeah, it's the
We got a
honeymoon
fifth
phase.
anniversary coming up in May.
Yeah, in May.
Yeah, that's the honeymoon phase.
So-
Wait. I got to do it right. It'll be
We've been
5
together a lot
long
longer
years.
than that, though.
Gosh, what would you call 48?
You
Ooh.
know.
That's good. That's impressive.
All right. Okay, guys. I appreciate you hanging out with us. We'll be back next Thursday night. I may or may not have a guest coming on next Thursday night. We'll wait and see. But guys, until then, y'all have a great week.
Thanks, guys. It's a pleasure.